Hey, folks, I'm so glad you could join me today on the podcast. I'm excited to welcome three Republicans who are working to revive a Republican Party that has disintegrated through division, chaos, and just a whole bunch of bullshit. You don't recognize it. I don't recognize it. And I'm in it. I appreciate their effort to kind of get us to a new space and to do something better than what we see happening now. Chris Vance has spent 37 years working in the Republican Party as a staffer, candidate, elected official, and state party chairman. He is the author of The Fall of the Shining City, What Happened to the Republican Party, Why It Happened, and What Must Happen Now to Save American Democracy. Chris is a good guy. He's out there working very hard, along with Barbara Comstock, former member of Congress, senior advisor with Baker Donaldson and representing at one time Virginia's 10th congressional district. She worked as a strategic advisor for the Mitt Romney presidential campaigns, was head of research and strategy at the Republican National Committee, and worked on the George W. Bush 2000 presidential campaign. And my buddy Charlie Dent, I've known Charlie a long time. He's a political commentator. You'll see him on our air at MSNBC from time to time. He's the former member of Congress from the 15th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. Additionally, he served as the chairman of the House Committee on Ethics from 2015 to 2017. Each of these individuals have something to say about this new effort within the Republican Party to revive our Republican legacy. We'll get into that and a lot more right here on the Michael Steele Podcast coming up after this quick message. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Michael Steele Podcast. So I'm excited for this conversation. Y'all know I'm excited about all the conversations we have on this program, but this one is special in so many ways because over my many years in politics, I've worked with each one of these individuals before they became public officials, members of Congress, while they were running state party operations. So it's a real treat to welcome Congressman Charlie Dent, Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, and Chairman Chris Vance to the podcast. What's up? Welcome.
Good morning.
Great to be with everybody.
It's good to have you guys. So, there's a lot to get into, but in terms of what's happening, Barbara and I, before the gentleman showed up, we were kind of commiserating on the week that was, which was just a complete cluster, what on so many levels. But the real thing for me for this conversation that I why it was so important and why I think it matters is the three of you are part of a revival of sorts, a revitalization of Republican values and ideas legacy that has gotten trampled by MAGA and Trumpism. And a couple of weeks ago now, Chris, you were spearheading the launch of our Republican Legacy, a group that was formed. I was one of the original founders, as was Barbara and Charlie of ORL, and this idea of restoring the Republican legacy. Talk, if you would, Charlie, about this concept of legacy and why it's so important right now as we watch the disintegration of a once proud Republican Party.
Yeah, my simple view on this is that MAGA, the MAGA movement has a view, and I've often said it's defined by protectionism, isolationism, at times nativism, sometimes nihilism, and certainly it's a form of populism, and I have felt that there has not been a suitable alternative, at least not one that's been articulated. That we cannot battle the MAGA ideology with silence, which has often been the case. People have just clammed up, and that's why the MAGA ideology is ascendant, because there's no one else pushing an alternative view. And of course, that's why we have our Republican legacy that has articulated 5 core principles, which we can get into at some point here, that we talk about the union, the Constitution, fiscal responsibility, peace through strength. We talk about all these things, but in a way that's coherent and that contrasts nicely with MAGA. There are a lot of Republicans who are looking for something better. I don't like to use the term Republican in exile. I just feel like a lot of Republicans are just looking for leadership. They're looking for somebody to stand up and make the case. And we saw those people who voted for Nikki Haley, who I think broadly supports our view of the world. And there are others who are supporters of Donald Trump and MAGA, but would prefer something else. But until they hear that, until they see there's a movement, they're not going to engage.
Yeah, I think that's been an important part of it, Barbara. You and I know well, certainly the DMV, how the politics in this region has changed over the last 20 years or more. But the one through line has always been, at least for me, and I suspect for you too, the set of ideas that Charlie mentioned there, peace through strength, strong economy, individual rights and liberties, regardless of what the policy was, that thread was an important part to be woven into it. What you have now is a deconstruction of that in so many ways. So talk about how we go about restoring those value sets, those principles in this environment in a way that reimagines the policy. Because as a member of Congress, that was your ball game. That was your casting votes and sitting in committees around a set of policies. How do we convey that aspect of it, particularly given that it seems that a lot of the Republicans in Congress right now really don't give a crap about the policy as long as they reach the end goal of keeping Trump happy.
Yeah, or get to the 218 in the House and the 51 in the Senate to govern, which of course they're not governing, they're just letting Trump do whatever he wants. So the thing that I think is important about a Republican legacy is to stand up for the Republican values that we all had, which was, free markets and free trade works rather than tariffs. Republicans always said, we aren't for higher taxes. Tariffs are taxes. And you've just had the case where George Allen, former governor of Virginia, was on that case. It was conservatives like Judge Michael McConnell and other conservatives who were on that case that is now won, and with conservative judges. Now the Trump administration is appealing, but they're saying Congress needs to do tariffs if you're going to do them, because Congress needs to raise taxes. Not the president can't entirely go in there and do it unilaterally. So Republicans, conservatives agree with that. And we think as Republicans, lower taxes are better for the economy than higher taxes. And I think most Republicans, even in Congress, agree with that, but they're afraid of Trump. Of course, we also agree with supporting our allies and having relationships, because Trump is finding now, when he's not able to make 90 deals in 90 days, he doesn't have a lot of friends. And if you don't have friends, that is not a good place to be. And I always felt, as Ronald Reagan and even Mitt Romney said, a strong world in which America isn't the strongest, kid on the block is a very frightening world. And also the big thing that I think Trump is totally demolishing is innovation. I work in the tech space right now, and I just think an innovation economy, that's lower regulation, lower tax, and we push innovation. This president, Trump, is destroying the NIH, RFK is destroying, our medical innovation economy. So we have a great message, as conservatives, as Republicans, if we go out and do it. And I think the place to do it is probably going to be at the state level. Governors can make this case, candidates, at the, state delegates, just go out or representatives go out and make this case. Unfortunately, right now, it's really Democrats who are making these cases to have, to get rid of tariffs, to, be, lower on taxes. And I think whether you're a Democrat, Independent, or Republican, if you make these conservative principles arguments, you are going to do better than a MAGA person, because MAGA is just one person and Trump changes his mind every day. And I think you also have to be good on law and order, which this president is not, because he pardoned a bunch of thugs. We know that. So when people ask me, why have you stayed a Republican? I say, listen, I was here first. Donald Trump was supporting Democrats in the 90s. I'm not going to get kicked out by a bunch of people who aren't Republicans. I am going to support Democrats when I am faced with a Republican candidate who is not supporting these principles, who's just capitulating to a one man, who's all over the place. And when I see a Democrat who's more in line with these free market kind of principles that I've always supported, I will support that Democrat instead. But I do think we need a good two-party system. And I want to, I'm not going to run again for something, but I try and find and coach candidates out there and I think the state level is probably the best place they can escape MAGA right now. And if they want to run and do things and try and get back to these good principles and show and be innovative and be low regulation and low tax on the state level and show that it works.
Right.
People just want, like as Charlie's governor up there, Shapiro says, make stuff work. When you make it work, you win. People just want their lives to work and get out of their way. And, Bill Buckley used to say he liked, I saw someone quoting him, he really liked Switzerland because nobody knew who was heading up things, because everything just worked there. And having just been there recently, my God, their infrastructure is so awesome. They make everything work, and they have tons of wealth there because they do make everything work. Make stuff work in a state, and you will, people will beat a path to your door.
No, they will. And Chairman Vance, that's really where you and I come in, identifying the people who make stuff work. As chairman, we have the responsibility of sort of building the party from the ground up, financing its infrastructure, making sure that infrastructure is in place, making sure it works. You are pretty much the back end architect of building out this new ORL effort, our Republican legacy effort. Talk about the grassroots component of this. It is an amazing thing, and it says a lot that in 2 short months, you have been able to identify and put in place 20 state chairmen. You have begun to put in place the infrastructure that aligns in large measure with what both Barbara and Charlie just mentioned. Talk about what that looks like, what it means, and what the response is to this idea of restoring this legacy of the Republican Party for Republicans like us who've not left. To Barbara's question that she gets, I get it a lot too. Why are you still here? And I give them 2 reasons, Barbara. I say, 1, I was here first, and 2, it pisses them off. So that's why I'm still here. Chairman, talk about that.
Yeah. So, Michael, I appreciate your kind words. Politics is a team sport. I'm just part of the team. The 3 of you and a bunch of other heroes created ORL last year to accomplish these missions. And you did some really good things, but you launched it right in the middle of the presidential campaign. So it did not get the attention it deserves, really. Late last summer, ORL brought me in to try and do some grassroots work to expand the organization into more of a mobilization organization. And so we've added the element of recruiting a shadow version of the Republican National Committee. We have an ORL National Committee made up of our supporters and led by, right now, we're not quite at 20, we're at 17 state chairmen. These are good folks, some of them party veterans who've signed on to help lead the effort in their state. Now, politics is all about winning. And I'm a former state legislator and a former county official, but kind of what's informing me in this experience is my experience as a state party chairman and fighting the battle at the grassroots. And we're trying to do what other ideological movements have done throughout my career. I was lucky enough to be in Washington State, where the Slade Gorton, Jennifer Dunn, Dan Evans moderates consistently governed the party and led the Republican Party in our state. But the far right, the Ron Paul people, the libertarians, other people to the right, were always trying to take over. They're always challenging us in primaries and challenging us in state party elections. And the way that you build a party is to beat them. It is about winning. So before you can win, you got to have a team. And since 2016, a lot of us who really ran the Republican Party for over a generation, Reagan, Bush, McCain, Romney, center-right conservatives, we got beat in 2016. And unfortunately, a lot of people just kind of walked away and didn't fight back. Our Republican legacy is the first of these so-called Never Trump groups, and I've been involved in a whole bunch of them, that is dedicated specifically to fighting within the Republican Party. And we are not going to retake control of the party tomorrow, but Donald Trump will not be the Republican nominee in 2028. We can now finally see the day when he will not be the all-powerful, unchallenged leader of the Republican Party. And that leaves the door open for center-right, classic, traditional, principled Republicans to come back and really have a fighting chance to win primary elections, win party elections, and redefine the Republican Party back to what it was. Traditional values, but with new issues, new realities, and really build a new version of the Republican Party. ORL is not new, but this phase of it is new. We're off to a great start, and we're building. It's going to keep growing.
So I like what you just said there, Chairman, in terms of the process. It's not overnight. It's going to involve sort of hand-to-hand combat, if you will, internally. So I ask you guys, what does the Republican Party look like in 20 years, in a post-Trump era? Now, look, caveat: Trump says he wants to run again in 2028. There are idiots out there trying to make that happen. Little thing standing in the way is called the Constitution. We'll see how much they try to blow that up. I'm gonna go though with conventional wisdom that's largely bullshit and it's not going to happen. So he goes away in 2028. JD Vance assumes he will be the heir apparent. I think that'll be a little bit of a fight. But when you're looking at that time horizon, given where you are with the development of ORL, and I guess really kind of tacking into Chris's point about how this new messaging gets into the bloodstream of the party, what do you think the party looks like in 20 years?
Well, I think one of the things, and we saw this because back last time Trump was president, every year he was president, Republicans lost on the ballot, right? The tradition, in Virginia, our republic, we had a supermajority, we got wiped out. This year, Abigail Spanberger is going to win for governor, and we will have a Democratic trifecta in Virginia again. And then New Jersey, same thing. They're going to you'll have a Democratic governor in Virginia, even though they're going to make a lot of talk about having a shot with a Republican. And then I think you're going, in Pennsylvania, Charlie could tell us, but I'm sure, Governor Shapiro will win handily for re-election. And I guess you have a split there in the House and Senate, but there certainly have been gains from Trump being president there. So, and you've had the same thing in Michigan. Michigan has, you have a trifecta in Michigan, and we have 2 Democratic senators there. So I think in swing states, Virginia used to be swing, you had a loss during the first Trump years, and I think you'll continue to see those losses. Arizona is another example of where Republicans have lost. So I think continued losses in swing areas and maybe some other areas when they lose the House next year, which I expect they will, unless he tries to do some kind of extra constitutional thing.
We'll talk about that.
What he's doing in LA.
A big flag. Put that flag in there. Yeah.
But I think losing opens up the opportunity to say, hey, maybe we need to get back to doing some basics. And that's where I think our Republican legacy, working at the state level, working with getting state reps elected, just people who are knocking on people's door and saying, hey, I want to fix your potholes. You had that mayor out in Nebraska, that race, that was actually a decent Republican who was running, but she decided to run on trans issues and bathrooms issues. And the Democrats said, hey, I want to fix your potholes. I don't want to be in your bathrooms. And he won. Now, if you have Republicans who decide to say, hey, you know what? I want to fix your schools. I want to fix your potholes. And I want to lower your taxes and your regulations. I think Republicans that kind of Republican will have an opening in those swing states. But if they keep doing, in Virginia, we have nobody in Northern Virginia who's even running or winning, because we have Gorka's wife is the chairman of our party in Fairfax. Can you imagine how unwelcome and the kind of candidates they run? We only have one Republican as a supervisor. I don't think we have any school board people, because all they run on are bathroom issues and those, and they don't run on education. So, if Republicans get back to those basic things, like we want to help your kids' schools and we want to help make your lives better and lower your taxes, which the one Republican who exists in Fairfax actually talks about lowering taxes, then we'll have a shot again. So, but I think Republicans are going to have to lose a lot before there's going to be this opening for our type of Republican who fixes your problems.
Charlie, how do you see it in Pennsylvania? Because you guys are bellwether, bullseye. Some states ebb and flow in terms of their importance in any election cycle, presidential or congressional. Pennsylvania is pretty consistent, and it is a very interesting cross section. Urban, suburban, exurbs, rural, city, traditional attitudes, progressive attitudes. How do you see the party translating, and particularly the ORL messaging for the party translating where you are?
Well, let me first try to answer the 20-year question. Where are we going to be in 20 years? Let's pivot back to Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
On the 20-year issue, the Republican Party has become much more of a working class party, and we saw this happening over time. It preceded Donald Trump. It obviously accelerated during Donald Trump's time, but we become more of a working class party. I think that the challenge, and that's great, but the problem though for us is that we have to think about what the future of our country looks like, what does the Republican Party how does it want to play in this world? The Republican Party had become an internationalist party, that we believed in constructive international engagement. We believed in embracing allies, rejecting tyrannical dictators like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. And then under Trump, that changed. He's much more receptive to autocrats. He is less internationally focused. He's talked about retreating. A trade war is a form of American retrenchment. It's a form of, as is walking away from NATO, as is shutting down all your tools of soft power, which we've done. So it looks like America is abandoning the field, or at least trying to behave in a very transactional America alone type of way. And so, in 20 years from now, is this what the Republican Party wants to be? Like back to the 1930s, and America first, meant something. And that's when Trump talks about America first, he's talking about the 1930s and bringing it back here to the 2020s. So we have to think about that. Also, in terms of social issues, Barbara alluded to it with the fixation on bathrooms and trans. I think the party has to be smarter socially. Now, there's going to be disagreement among some of our friends. And I don't agree with the idea we just go back to where we were.
Right.
I just, that time was then. But those 5 principles that we have identified, we do think are enduring and have sustained the party since Abraham Lincoln. And those principles should sustain us going forward. Now, I would argue that we have to become constructively internationally engaged once again, which we are not now. I would also say that we need to become much more socially tolerant or sensible. And in other words, we can have a diversity of opinion on issues like abortion or gay rights or whatever. We can allow for that. And I think right now, we expect conformity and, being obsessed with bathroom bills and trans and sports. We can all agree that what happened at the University of Pennsylvania, where that swimmer transitioned from male to female and broke all the records and won the NFL, that was unfair.
Right. Right.
We can do that. There are folks on the left, who have a hard time with that statement. They'll call you transphobic. And so we don't need the rights version of that far left group. We need people who can talk sensibly about these issues and offer constructive solutions. That's where we got to go. I don't know if we're going to get there in 20 years. I sure as hell hope we do. Now, in Pennsylvania, I would also argue that, we're a classic swing state, a bellwether state. We got urban, suburban, rural areas, an interesting mix of folks. Look, Pennsylvania has a very strong working class ethic, and we saw something happen in our state and I saw this since I was first elected in 1990 in northeastern Pennsylvania and southwestern Pennsylvania. We used to have a lot of, I'll say, ethnic white Democrats. Some would call them KC Democrats, or Catholic Democrats, pro-labor, pro-life, pro-gun. That was kind of the profile. Well, there are a lot of them. They were Democrats, but who were functionally Republican in many ways. And in the southeastern part of our state, around Philadelphia, where much of the 40% of the voting population is, we had a lot of Republicans in presidential years who were functional Democrats. And what's happened in Pennsylvania is people have now aligned their party registrations with their voting patterns. And so things have changed dramatically. So those areas of southwestern Pennsylvania that were so strongly Democratic are now very strongly Republican. And same is true in the Philadelphia region, which had been very strongly Republican, are now, pretty strongly Democratic, with the exception of Bucks County, which is really just a total, dark purple, deep purple county. But Pennsylvania is an interesting mix. I think it will continue to be a swing county. And a lot of people misunderstand Pennsylvania. Like we saw, the only thing I noticed during the election was that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden agreed on one thing, blocking the Nippon U.S. Steel deal. And these are people who are all looking at Pennsylvania nostalgically. They're looking at steel nostalgically. My dad was 30 years in the steel industry. I went through the demise of Bethlehem Steel, second largest steel producer in the world at one time. We're done crying over it. Okay. We've got to figure it out. And I'll say good for Trump. He approved the deal. I'm glad he did. Then they imposed tariffs at 50% simultaneously, which is a disaster. Now, nevertheless, but at least, so people look at Pennsylvania from a nostalgic lens, whether it's through coal or steel. And this is part of our heritage for sure. And we're still a great industrial state, but I think a lot of people have misread us and don't realize that the people are a lot smarter and have kind of moved on some of these issues and are, looking for something better, part of the new economy. And many parts of our state have done extremely well through this transition, like the area.
And I think that, like you're saying, 20 years from now, we do have to bring, the Republican, the Trump coalition has prided itself on bringing more working class people into the party. Listen, the Reagan coalition did that too. And, of course you want to bring, the whole point is to unity, which is what we're trying to do. But you also want to be bringing everybody, improve everybody's skills and have a recognition that in an economy where if you aren't lifelong learners, you're going to get left behind. You can't be unrealistic about what the situation is. And that my frustration with the Trumpers and how they deal with it is they just want to blame somebody for, why you lost your job and not have a recognition of the economy that we are in these days, the worldwide economy, that you've got to be always improving everybody's skills, no matter what your skill is. If you're an attorney, when I went to law school, none of the men knew how to type. I typed all their papers because they didn't know how to type. That's how I paid a lot of my way through law school. But now everybody knows how to type. And you also have to learn how to do, all the other computer skills that we've all learned through our lives. And the same thing with any blue collar job, you have to always learn new skills. And we're all going to have to learn new skills throughout our lifetime, no matter what your job is. And so we need to build, whether it's through our tax code, through our government programs, all kinds of skills so that whatever whatever blue collar job you're in, why don't we make it so that, if you are a plumber, we're going to help you own your plumbing job, business, and become a manager and own several of them and coordinate by going to, community college and getting a business degree. So you want to always have upward mobility built into whatever, coalition you're putting into, because that is the American dream. And you don't hear that from the Trump coalition. Right. It's a lot of grievance, and they aren't really selling that to people in the way that the Reagan coalition said, listen, we want everyone moving up. And when you look at the Trump family and how all the, greed and the grift that they're doing, nothing in their experience understands that, how people do move up the economic ladder because they were born with silver spoons and now are grifting off of their people in a way that's unprecedented. So I think we do have that opportunity to take innovation, whether it's AI, whether technology that gives people these tools, and really, give a new generation of young people those kind of tools, no matter what kind of job you have, whether it's community college or, legal or whatever profession you go into. I mean, we still need doctors, we still need professionals, which, a lot you hear MAGA like, oh, we don't want any of those people. Well, yeah, try operating on your,
on yourself
with a plumber. I hope good luck with that. You still need all these cancer specialists that they're driving over to Europe because they're driving them out of the NIH. I would like to have Alzheimer's and diabetes and cancer cured in my lifetime. I'd like to see that because it would save a lot on our budget.
There you go.
Barbara, we have to focus though too on, look, I think it's important that the Republican Party has become a working class party. I think it's a good thing, but it should not be an anti-intellectual party either. Right. We should be an innovation party. I mean, that's why I'm deeply disturbed by Trump's assault, as you pointed out, on NIH and other forms.
And universities.
Yeah, I was going to get into Harvard and MIT. Whatever mistakes Harvard has made in dealing with anti-Semitism does not justify shutting down their medical research programs or quantum computing issues, or at MIT. These institutions are important to this country and to this world and help our economy grow. And so we have to be a party that embraces innovation and entrepreneurship. It can't be simply about anger and grievance and saying those guys over there in the ivory tower are horrible people. I think that is
and they're taxing universities more. In their tax bill right now, they're going to tax the endowments of universities. I mean, and of charities. And actually, you saw another former RNC chair and a former boss of mine, Jim Nicholson, had a great piece in the Wall Street Journal last week, or the week before, talking about why are Republicans increasing the taxes on private charities and endowments who are trying to help people in the private sector. Foundation. And he's on the board of one of them. And this tax bill has this new tax that's going to, we all give money to our favorite charities. And now Republicans of all people who've always said, we want to have the private sector do these things that we don't think the government is good at doing. And now they're going to go raid the coffers of charities and bring that money into the government, totally against everything. And they're going after a lot of charities. They want to, they had an executive order early on where they want to go after a lot of these charitable endowments and sue them and go after them for perceived DEI or whatever they're doing. And they have no business getting involved in the jobs of private charities or taxing these private charities, a lot of them are conservative. I mean, listen,
they are.
Hillsdale is getting, when you have
Hillsdale's going to get hit. Well,
yeah,
that's
the Koch Foundation has gotten involved. Like I mentioned, Jim Nicholson's charity that he's involved in. And so a lot of these charities that they're thinking they're targeting maybe the Gates Foundation, but they are hitting conservative foundations and conservative efforts. And you open this door, this is everything, Catholic charities, all the things that you've always cared about. Then liberals will come back, circle around and say, hey, you guys wanted to tax charities? How about if we just get rid of 501(c)(3) status and go after your church because we don't like your politics. We don't like that they're pro-life. You are opening a Pandora's box that's very dangerous and hurting all the good work that we know our charities and, all of us are locally involved in charities and we don't want that done. So it's crazy what they're, it's crazy, mindlessness.
But it's crazy, but it's consistent. And I want to get the chairman on that part of it, as well as from a grassroots side of it, building out this new infrastructure within the party over the next 20 years and what that looks like. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back. We're going to continue with Charlie Dent, Barbara Comstock, Chris Vance right after this. I'm not big on trends, but I am big on clothes that feel good and last a long time. That's why I keep going back to Quince. Their lightweight layers and high quality staples have become my everyday essentials. Quince has all the things you actually want to wear this summer, like organic cotton silk polos, European linen beach shorts, and comfortable pants that work for everything from backyard hangs to, nice dinners. You want to look good and feel good, right? The best part? Well, everything with Quince is half the cost of similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middlemen, Quince gives you luxury pieces without the markups. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics. And yes, those finishes are fine. So I shop with Quince, and you should too. I revamped my closet with items I got, and their style, quality, and price are superb. Stick to the staples that last, folks, with elevated essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/steal for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/steal to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/steal. Welcome back, everybody, to the Michael Steele Podcast. So we are talking with our friends from our Republican Legacy, a old yet new organization of Republicans. These are men and women who are still Republicans. They don't have a pinky toe out there in some other space. They are building the party, rebuilding the party from within around the legacy of traditional Republican values. Chairman Vance, before we went to the break, we were talking about the next 20 years. What does this party look like? How do you see it as you're building organization by organization across 50 states, what this Republican Party will look like?
Well, I think Charlie said something very important, which is that Donald Trump has taken the Republican Party back to a version of what it was in the 1920s and 30s. Reactionary, isolationist, protectionist, nativist. I mean, the Republican Party, I would not have been a Republican in the 1920s under Hoover, Coolidge, Harding. When they shut down immigration, they refused to join the League of Nations. They massively raised tariffs. I mean, you can make an argument that the things they did led directly to World War II and the Great Depression. But throughout the rest of that was an aberration. The rest of our history, we have been a party of moderate, progressive, conservative values from Lincoln to Reagan, which was grow the free market economy, create jobs and opportunity, but with a robust safety net to protect people who need help. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was one of the great progressives of all time that made America more fair, protected our natural resources. And that was basically our philosophy from Tom Dewey to Dwight Eisenhower to Ronald Reagan. Trump, again, is the second Republican aberration, where he's taken the party, instead of supporting the principles that we have in ORL about economic growth and freedom and the Constitution and strong national defense. Instead, it's basically a party of white nationalism and culture wars and grievance and authoritarianism. This can't be our future. I mean, we're going to have a decision to make, and it's going to be made on the political battlefield, whichever side can win these next elections. Trump came along and mobilized people and was a very attractive choice. After a few years of the base was really getting tired of the people who'd led the party before. But now he's led the party in a completely antithetical direction to what we believe in. I hope 20 years from now, we are a party still focused on our 5 core principles that ORL has enunciated, which are basically the same traditional 5 Republican principles that have always existed, but adapted to new issues. AI is new. The fact that our economy has changed so much is new. The fact that the United States has become so tremendously economically, ethnically, and culturally diverse is a new thing. We have to be a party that applies our tried and true principles to these new realities. We cannot continue to be a party of MAGA anger, and that's what we're out here fighting for.
Charlie,
I think it will be more diverse too, and that needs to be as we develop, people on the state level, that it is more diverse, because as Donald Trump's trying to, deport and run everyone out of the country. I mean, ironically, he's been losing the white vote and trying to proclaim that he has, Hispanic support or Black support, while he's trying to round up and deport, Hispanic, the population. I mean, so it is kind of a bizarre, he's really shrinking the very, population that he's claiming he's gained. I mean, Latinos for Trump, the woman who was running it in Florida, has come out and said, this isn't why I supported him. They said they were just going to remove violent criminals and people who had done things here. And now they're just going after, everybody, as, Stephen Miller has made very clear. He wants them to just find anybody and overstay on a visa, or go after people who've been here for years, living peacefully and working and paying taxes. Now they want to go after everybody. And so they've now lost their Latinas for Trump leader in Florida. I'm sure there are others who aren't speaking out because they're afraid, because silence is a real, part of their design. They want people to be silent, but I don't think they'll be silent at the ballot box.
But yeah, I agree with that, Barbara. And Charlie, I think when you contextualize what Barbara just said about basically the lie to people, a lot of Hispanics, now beginning to realize, oh, you're going after everybody. It's not just the criminal, it's everybody. You have,
Well, except they're not going after people in South Dakota on the farms where they've publicly said, hey, in South Dakota, all of our farms do have migrant illegal workers, but we know they won't come after us because we, the owners of the farms, voted for Trump. Those kind of examples they don't go after.
But even at a certain point, that's no longer a safeguard, because you voted for Trump or spend a lot of money. Doesn't mean that he ain't gonna turn on you. Just ask Elon Musk, dummy. But you do have, for example, and I think one aspect of this, which I'd be very intrigued to get your thoughts on, is what we saw this past weekend with the use of the National Guard in Los Angeles. This idea of claiming a crisis, declaring it such, and then using presidential powers aggressively against the sovereignty of a state. Where there's no crisis on the ground. People are protesting. Yeah, they burned a trash can or a car, but hell, that's not That's typical in American protests, right? Somebody's car gonna get torched. There's no violence. There's no one being harmed or hurt in that regard. Yet those are the images that Trump wants to feed off, Charlie, to create this narrative for uber presidential power.
Well, yeah, clearly the situation in California strikes me as one that state and local law enforcement should be able to handle. And you ordinarily, the process is the governor, would deploy the National Guard. He hasn't done so, or request federal assistance. Again, he hasn't done so. So Trump is trying to use these protests and then escalate them into something larger, for political benefit. Clearly, that's what he's doing. And so, long story short, the party has a problem, and that Trump is doing this clearly because he thinks, we're distracting away from talk of the economy right now. We're not talking about all the other things that he's dealing with, the reconciliation package. You can have an argument whether or not it's going to help the economy or not, but we're not talking about any of that stuff. We're talking about this issue on immigration and fanning these flames. And this is where I have a problem with where the direction of the party. We just can't be about anger and grievance and always just blaming the other, and just simply following Donald Trump about whatever it is. What's the policy of the Republican Party on a given issue? Well, whatever it is the president says it is. And that's not something that we can endure long term. This party is about something larger than one person or one person's inclinations. It has to be about something that's enduring and principles based. I mean, can you remember too, Michael, all those years, and Chris and Barbara, you remember, I always said we had the chiefs of the Republican purity police who are really at calling out rhinos, always out there saying, you're not a real Republican if you're not right to life, if you're not, against gay rights, if you're not pro free trade, if you're not, go down a long list of things. And so if you deviated, you were a rhino. And now, these guys who are all leading that purity, the chiefs of the purity police, those guys, what did they do when Donald Trump came along? They all just said, we're for whatever he's for. Right? Yeah. Here, all those guys, whether it's at Heritage or Club for Growth, they all just jumped in line because they wanted to have access to power and wanted to raise the money. And that's the problem, is that the people who were supposedly guardians of the ideological, purity, the doctrinaire folks, really we find out really weren't so doctrinaire at all.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's one of the biggest shocks of my adult life is so many people I worked with and respected just caved in, bent the knee, declared loyalty to Trump, or just walked away. But you know what? That's also MAGA's weakness. It's all centered on one guy. Well, that one guy ain't going to live forever, and he's not going to be their leader in about 2 years. In about 2 years, you're going to see 6, 7, 8, 10 Republicans running for president. And 1 or 2 or 3, some of them are going to be from our wing of the party. We're going to have somebody out there. I don't know who yet, but we're going to have somebody out there we can support. And Trump will not be there. And when he exits the stage, I think they're going to look around and go, oh my God, what do we do now? Daddy's gone. Who do we follow? and that is when people get depressed and despondent at what's right in front of them today. And I understand that. And we are a minority in the party today. But it's going to look really different in about 2 years.
So we're coming to the close because I know you guys have got to jump to other things, and I appreciate taking the time to get the work of our Republican legacy in front of the American people, in front of Republicans, to let them know that there are individuals within the party that are fighting for this legacy, that we're asking folks to come out of the shadows and be engaged in this emerging leadership. I really want to thank each of you for that work, and thank each of you for the time, because it's not been an easy journey the last 10 years, as we all know. Each of you have addressed in various ways how things broke down, but also more importantly, how they're being restitched, brought back. I think one of you made the point, look, we're not looking to recreate the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan or Dwight Eisenhower. What we're trying to do is stand up a Republican Party in this two-party system that can be competitive, that can espouse a value set and principles that speak to the American people, and that are devoid of a lot of the ugly underbelly of our culture and our times, that put us in fear of each other, forgetting the humanity of each other, where we're, refusing help to kids, not just here, but around the globe, as we shut down programs that serve the humanity of the world. And so I applaud you guys for that, the being on the front lines of making that case, and really appreciate each of you, Congressman Dent, Congressman Comstock, Chairman Vance, for your leadership. Thank you guys very, very much.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Great to be here.
Thank you. And I think there's a real opportunity out there for new people with new ideas to take these basic principles, apply it to what's going on, and somebody with some good vision and values to really fill a void of people who are a majority. And note that Trump has never gotten a majority, but you go out in a state, show that this works, you will get a lot of attention.
You will. All right, folks. Well, that does it for this time together. I always love our time together, and I thank you so much for it. I want to thank you for listening. As always, do all the beautiful things you do to make me feel all yummy inside, for sure. And for all of those who have listened to the podcast over the years, in a very special way, thank you. This podcast is going on hiatus as I shift my focus to hosting my new show on MSNBC, The Weeknight, Mondays through Fridays, 7 p.m. Eastern. But I want you to take care of yourselves, and remember, don't play with stupid. Hey, everybody. Michael Steele here. I just want to take a moment away from the lights and the microphones to give a very special shout out to an incredible production team over at Two Squared Media Productions, who have produced my podcast for the past 8 years. Beowulf Rockland and his team have been phenomenal. Rosabelle Hine and others have really stepped up and made this thing work for the past 8 years, from getting the authors and the politicians and everyday folk to be a part of the conversation. Thank you so much for that effort, for the love that you put into making this podcast a success. It has been a real treat for me in so many ways, a very special journey, of course. And while we're pausing, we're not ending, we'll be back, you know me. I did want to say thank you to them for putting in the time and making the Michael Steele Podcast fun, exciting, and something that hopefully people enjoyed listening to. So thanks again, folks. God bless. And remember what I said, don't play with stupid.